We are only a mere few months into Trump's presidency, but Republican figures will already be starting to think about whether to run for president in 2028. There's obviously one frontrunner. There always is when an incumbent is in his second term, the vice president. However, vice presidents are not just handed the nomination, they have to work for it. And so you best believe other candidates will run too, if for no other reason than to elevate their name recognition in the hopes of cabinet positions or to lay the groundwork for 2032. In this video, I will go through the 20 top contenders for the Republican primary. I've split the candidates on this list into 4 tiers: the frontrunners, the contenders, the dark horses, and the long shots. So without further ado, let's get into it. The frontrunners. JD Vance. JD Vance is the 40-year-old vice president of the United States. Before that, he briefly served as a senator for Ohio for 2 years. Vance initially gained prominence not through politics, but through his authorship of New York Times bestseller Hillbilly Elegy, which was also adapted into an Oscar-nominated Netflix film. The book chronicled Vance's upbringing in the Rust Belt with a drug-addicted mother. During the 2016 presidential election, Vance was one of the most prominent Trump critics on the circuits.
It's that Trump is a really bad candidate, and frankly, I think a really bad person.
However, in the run-up to the 2022 midterms, he kissed the ring and earned Trump's endorsement for the Republican nomination for the Ohio Senate seat. Since then, Vance has been hardcore MAGA. He would represent a genuine continuation of the presidency of Donald Trump, with an emphasis on America first, on industry, on isolationism, and on the culture war. And he's also the absolute frontrunner. He leads in the very limited amount of polls that have been done, and bar scandal or a fallout with his boss, it'll be very difficult for any other candidate to take the nomination away from him. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is the 54-year-old Secretary of State. Before that, he was a senator for the state of Florida. Rubio is an incredibly experienced and bipartisanly respected politician. He was known for his bipartisanship in the Senate, and during his younger years had the political instincts and skills to work himself to the very top of Florida state politics. Rubio has already tried running for president once, in 2016, where he came in 3rd place behind Trump and Ted Cruz. During the campaign, he got into a bit of a tiff for suggesting Trump wasn't particularly hung, and with fellow contender Christie wiping the floor with Rubio during a very infamous debate.
You see, everybody, I want the people at home to think about this. That's what Washington, D.C. does. The drive-by shot at the beginning with incorrect and incomplete information, and then the memorized 25-second speech that is exactly what his advisors gave him.
Since then, Rubio has become an eager Trump supporter and defender, but he's still also seemingly a bit of what some would call a neoconservative. This makes him an interesting candidate. He wouldn't be an anti-Trump candidate by any means, but he would also be a small step in a more traditionally conservative direction. And if that's not a good bet for building a post-Trump Big Tent Republican base, I don't know what is. Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump Jr. is a 47-year-old businessman and the eldest son of President Donald Trump. It is by no means certain that Trump Jr. would want to run, but if he did, he could very well clear the field, even of frontrunner JD Vance. Because Trump Jr. would probably be able to get what Vance couldn't in that scenario: an endorsement from Trump Sr. It is obvious that Trump Jr. has taken a serious interest in politics over the last few years and that he wants to get involved. And the Trump name is very much worth its weight in gold in contemporary American conservative circles. But it's not just the name that will carry him, but also his genuinely impressive knack for how to provoke Democrats and for firing up the Republican base. And so he would be a perfect and quite literal continuation of Trump Sr. in a way that would even eclipse what Vance could be. But we don't know for a fact that Trump Jr. would run. Maybe he'd prefer to start a political career in the Senate or as a governor, or maybe as vice president, perhaps to one of his good personal friends, JD Vance. Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott is the 67-year-old governor of Texas. Before that, he served as the Attorney General of the same state. Abbott has served as governor for over 10 years and has built a significant name recognition nationally. He's especially profiled himself with strong conservative positions. He's cracked down on illegal immigration with Operation Lone Star, he's banned abortion after 6 weeks, he's supported pro-oil and gas legislation, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, he opposed vaccine and mask mandates. Abbott is therefore on the right of the Republican Party. He isn't exactly MAGA in the same way that Trump is, but an Abbott nomination would not really be all that much of a deviation from the current administration. But he may struggle to pitch a narrative as to why the party should nominate him rather than someone like Vance instead. Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is the 46-year-old governor of Florida. Before that, he served in the U.S. House of Representatives. DeSantis ran in the 2024 Republican primary against Donald Trump. DeSantis' campaign tanked pretty badly, and he ended up dropping out after the Iowa caucus. During the campaign, his relations with Trump, which had previously been positive, also soured quite a bit. DeSantis is best known as a culture warrior and for the Parental Rights and Education Act, colloquially known as the Don't Say Gay Act, which prohibits public school discussion of sexual orientation. He's also known for successfully introducing an abortion ban after only 6 weeks of pregnancy. DeSantis' stock fell very significantly during the 2024 primary, and I would imagine the Trump and MAGA world will try to ensure he does not become the nominee. Not because he's politically out of sync with Trump, but because of their clear personal problems. However, if Trump were to lose favor with Republicans between now and 2028 and the culture war was still hot, then maybe there could be a genuine path for DeSantis. The Contenders. Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem is the 53-year-old Secretary of Homeland Security. Before that, she served as the governor of South Dakota. Noem is MAGA core. She was a Trumpian governor of her home state where she rejected mask and vaccine mandates and supported the state's blanket abortion ban. And she is a massive supporter of the oil sector and rejects the scientific consensus on climate change. She was considered for a time as a potential candidate to be Trump's 2024 running mate, but an autobiography that she published where she detailed how she had shot and killed her family dog seems to have taken her out of contention. Instead, she was made Secretary of Homeland Security, a job where she has made a massive name for herself as aggressively active in fighting illegal immigration, especially through the El Salvador Deportation Center. Noem would be a candidate who would appeal to MAGA world, which means she would be jostling for the same voters as Vance or potentially Trump Jr., both of whom have more name recognition than her. So unless she can find a way to really differentiate herself from the other MAGA candidates, she may have a hard time. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the 71-year-old Secretary of Health and Human Services. Before that, he was an environmental lawyer and an anti-vaccine campaigner. Kennedy comes from political royalty. His uncle was President John F. Kennedy, and his father was Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Both were Democrats, and so was Kennedy until last year. In 2024, Kennedy ran in the Democratic primary against Joe Biden for a few months, until he decided to run as an independent instead. However, just a few months before Election Day, he dropped his bid and endorsed Donald Trump. He was then made Secretary of Health and Human Services, an area of policy he cares deeply about. So much so that during his 2024 campaign, he ran using the slogan, "Make America Healthy Again," which entailed a degree of vaccine skepticism, as well as opposition to seed oils, artificial ingredients, and processed foods. Kennedy seems generally really liked by Trump supporters and the Republican Party at large. He is an immensely interesting political figure whose messages are resonating. But he's also weird, very weird, and I reckon if he were to run for president as a Republican, he would find that it's only a small part of the party who actively think he should be the front figure of the Republican cause. Glen Youngkin. Glen Youngkin is the 58-year-old governor of Virginia. Before that, he was a big guy in the finance world. Youngkin was elected governor in 2021 in a razor-tight contest in a state that's generally quite blue-leaning. During the campaign, Youngkin managed to walk a perfect tightrope of supporting Trump and MAGA-style policies with a more traditional delivery. During his tenure thus far, he has proven willing to work with Democrats on budgets and to codify same-sex marriage, but he's also been a critic of critical race theory, transgenderism, and abortion. Youngkin is still not a household name, but he is garnering recognition. I think he would be a tremendously smart choice for Republicans to make if they want a candidate who can appeal to the MAGA base, traditional Republicans, and even independent and moderate Democrats at the same time. But would he disappear in a primary contest and struggle to get airtime? I reckon so. Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp is the 61-year-old governor of Georgia. Before that, he served as the Secretary of State for the same state. Kemp is a very Trumpian type of politician who subscribes to MAGA views such as supporting tariffs, opposition to COVID-19 mask and vaccine mandates, and an often forgotten pillar of MAGA, advocating for agriculture subsidies. But he also does not get along with Trump in the slightest. The two men had a massive falling out in 2020 when Kemp certified the election result that saw Biden carrying the state of Georgia.
Kemp is very bad for the Republican Party.
This angered Trump so much so that in 2022, he endorsed a primary candidate to run against Kemp in the gubernatorial race. But Kemp handedly defeated Trump's candidate and won the election. So this makes Kemp a spectacular candidate in a very specific circumstance. If Trump, the man, becomes unpopular amongst Republicans, but the MAGA movement lives on, and this isn't entirely an impossibility. Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is the 53-year-old former ambassador to the United Nations during Trump's first term. Before that, she was governor of South Carolina. Haley left the first Trump administration on good terms with her boss, a serious abnormality. However, in 2024, she ran against him in the Republican primary, becoming his one main contender. This didn't do wonders for her relationship to Trump world. Add on the fact that she's generally speaking from a more neoconservative point of view, and she clearly is not Trump's heir apparent. But that creates a lane for her. She is someone who can very legitimately claim to be a new direction after Trump, and even more so than a Brian Kemp. She is more of an internationalist, is generally more of a small state Republican, and someone who would oppose high trade barriers. The question then becomes, will there be any lane like this to contest the primary in? Well, if 2024 was anything to go by, then no. And that was only one cycle after Trump lost in 2020 and was impeached a second time. Though, imagine if both Trump and Trumpism fell out of favor with Republicans and they started yearning for a more traditional neoconservative approach. Well, then Haley would be perhaps the best placed candidate. The dark horses. Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley is the 45-year-old senator from Missouri. Before that, he was the state's attorney general. Hawley is a very interesting political creature. He's very socially conservative and a serious culture warrior. He was also famously a bit of a leader in trying to overturn Joe Biden's election in 2021. But he's also in many ways quite fiscally socialist. He was a very prominent advocate for pushing for expanded stimulus checks during the COVID-19 pandemic. He's shown a willingness for nationalization of industry in his home state, and he's worked with Bernie Sanders on a series of draft bills, from one that would have capped credit card interest rates to another that would have raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Hawley is different enough in these ways to be able to differentiate himself from more bog-standard MAGA candidates and more traditional neoconservatives. But he would also need to be careful not to be drowned out by candidates whose ideologies are easier to follow. Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek Ramaswamy is a 39-year-old businessman and a 2026 Ohio gubernatorial candidate. He ran in the 2024 Republican presidential primary as an obvious bid to gain a national profile. He spent most of the campaign heralding Donald Trump and defending him to the other candidates during debates.
President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man.
He suspended his campaign and endorsed Trump after the Iowa caucus. After Trump was elected, he was initially appointed to co-lead Doge with Elon Musk, but was pushed out by the very same Musk. He then announced he would run for governor in Ohio in 2026. This candidacy suggests he's unlikely to run for president in 2028, but it doesn't wholly rule it out. If Ramaswamy were to run, it would probably be as a Trump continuity candidate, a lane that is already quite crowded and where he would be a small fish in a very big pond. So unless Trump were to have a falling out with Vance, Ramaswamy doesn't really have a narrative. But I think he could be a very serious VP contender. Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is the 54-year-old senator from Texas. In 2016, he ran for president in the Republican primary, coming in second place after Donald Trump. The last few months of the campaign turned very personal and tense between the two men, to the point where Cruz refused to endorse Trump at the Republican National Convention that year. However, today Cruz is mostly behind Trump and MAGA after many years of mending their relationship.
And they want him to go away. Let me tell you this right now, Donald J. Trump ain't going anywhere.
He's a hardcore culture warrior, a big oil guy, and very pro-life. Recently though, Cruz did imply criticism of Trump's tariff program, putting a bit of an ideological gap between the two of them. But by and large, the Cruz of today is a Cruz that would not be far off a continuity candidate. And that's a difficult position to find oneself in, because Vance is better placed then, and plus Cruz lacks the charisma that most people on this list have. The one big thing he has going for him though is that he knows how to run a presidential campaign. And that does mean something. Tim Scott. Tim Scott is the 59-year-old senator from South Carolina. Before that, he served in the House of Representatives. Scott ran in the 2024 Republican primary and was one of the small handful of candidates who managed to do so and stay in Trump's good graces. Scott isn't of the MAGA breed. He's more of a Christian conservative who just so happens to share Trump's views on many social issues. In other ways, Scott is much more of a traditional Republican on issues of the economy and international relations. Like in the 2024 primary, Scott struggles to find a narrative. He isn't the natural heir of Donald Trump, but he's also not an anti-Trumper. And this idea of an I like Trump but it's time for something else type voter seems to be a fiction. Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is the 42-year-old governor of Arkansas. Before that, she served as Trump's press secretary during his first term. Sanders' father, Mike Huckabee, also previously served as governor of Arkansas and currently serves as Trump's ambassador to Israel. So the Sanders family is clearly on good terms with Trump and MAGA world. Huckabee Sanders was also generally considered a good and loyal foot soldier for Trump during his first administration. As governor, she has proven to be a bit of a culture warrior on issues such as transgenderism and abortion. However, like so many other people on this list, I think she would struggle to find a lane to run in. She would want to be some variation of a Trump continuity candidate, but that's a crowded field. She may be someone who would foster greater implicit support from the current president, but she may also be mildly mired by her days as press secretary. It's not a job that makes anyone, not even the most talented speakers, look good or likable. The long shots. Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum is the 68-year-old Secretary of the Interior. Before that, he was governor of North Dakota. Burgum comes from a business background where he invested in a series of tech startups. Politically, he's mostly defined himself on support for the oil industry, an issue he is now partially spearheading in the executive branch. Burgum ran for president in the Republican primary in 2024, but he made practically no impression. He dropped out before voting started and endorsed Trump, who took a clear liking to him and considered him very seriously to be his running mate. Had Burgum been selected then, he would be a lot higher on this list. But as of today, he continues to be someone whose ambition seems to outshine his name recognition. Add on top of that the fact that he is the type of politician very much defined by a single issue, and he would seriously struggle in the 2028 primary to stand out. But if there turns out to be a serious hunger for someone who's experienced but still a blank slate, then maybe Burgum could be considered. Christie. Chris Christie is the 62-year-old former governor of New Jersey. He is a moderate Republican, a must for a governor of a generally blue state like New Jersey. His gubernatorial record is one of quite a few ups and downs. In 2012, he was heralded for his handling of Hurricane Sandy, but in the years following, he was embroiled in a scandal as his staff had knowingly caused a multiple-day traffic buildup in Fort Lee. Christie ran for president in both 2016 and 2024. In 2016, he dropped out early during the primaries and endorsed Donald Trump as one of the first of the other candidates. He would go on to lead Trump's 2016 transition team before being pushed out of Trump's inner circle by Jared Kushner. By 2020, Christie was an ardent Trump critic and ran in the primary in 2024 more or less as a purely anti-Trump candidate.
And a lonely, self-consumed, self-serving mirror hog is not a leader.
Christie is blunt, aggressive, and a bit rough around the edges. In many ways, he exhibits many of the same characteristics as Trump. So if there were a souring on Trump's policies, but not necessarily a souring on Trump's bombastic style, Christie could perhaps have a long shot chance. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is the 44-year-old Director of National Intelligence. Before that, she was a member of the House of Representatives for the Democrats. Politically, Gabbard is a non-interventionist above all else. She staked her career in Congress on critique of US foreign policy, and in 2020, she ran in the Democratic presidential primary on this very issue. She's now brought this view into the heart of the Trump administration, a view that actually fits quite well with Trump's isolationist America First ideology. Gabbard is someone who's very ideological and has a genuine base of support from ideological compatriots, in a similar way as RFK Jr. does, but I also think she would struggle getting many people outside of this circle to bat for her. She's also someone with such a strange past, running for president as a Democrat, previously being a big Bernie Sanders supporter and having met with Bashar al-Assad, that she may struggle to get a large coalition of voters together. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a 71-year-old political strategist who was paramount in the early days of Trump's political career. Before that, he helped co-found Breitbart News. Bannon is an alt-right conservative populist who advocates for America First policies. In many ways, he was very consequential in the founding of the MAGA movement. Bannon has had some serious run-ins with the law. First for mail fraud and money laundering in 2020, and then for contempt of Congress in 2022. But in some MAGA circles, that's actually a sign of strength and righteousness. His big difficulty will be the fact that he is not very likable in a way practically everyone else on this list is. He is unkempt, too ideological, and not someone who anyone could probably see as president. But he's made it clear that if Donald Trump doesn't decide to stand for a third term in 2028, Bannon may just feel obliged to have to carry the torch by running himself. Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the 79-year-old president of the United States. He served from 2017 to 2021 and started his second term in 2025. So, according to the 22nd Amendment, he is constitutionally barred from running for a third term. But that hasn't stopped Trump from raising the prospect himself. And although the White House has since clarified that this was a joke, Trump has broken with convention before. And who is to say that a legal challenge of the 22nd Amendment in front of the Supreme Court couldn't find in his favor? It seems unlikely, but stranger things have happened. And if any president were to rewrite the norms on this, it would be Trump. He would be best placed to carry on his own legacy and to deliver on the promises of MAGA and America First. And let's be honest, unless something drastic happened, if Trump could run in the 2028 Republican primary, he would win. And that's it. The 20 likeliest Republican nominees for the 2028 presidential election. Did I miss any? Who is your favorite or least favorite candidate? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.